Well, good morning. You guys are always so responsive. Thank you. If y'all ever plan to be everybody just be really quiet, that would be a miserable day. So I'm glad that you're always very, very chatty. So I wanted to take a couple of minutes before I get started here because Pastor Frank's not Pastor Frank. Frank's just Frank, right? But Frank has mentioned over the past couple of weeks about me going on sabbatical and so on and so forth. And I just kind of wanted to give you a little bit of insight on what that is and or a little more insight about what I'm doing specifically. He's mentioned it briefly. I don't have this part scripted, but hopefully I'm going to keep it short and just to give you a little bit of idea. And you'll feel free to kind of reach out and ask me any follow-up questions if you have one way or another. But I'm grateful for the church that's kind of granting me this opportunity to do this. And I just want you to know that this is not for me anyway, this is not, in this instance, this is not a 7-week vacation where I'm just going to go and just kind of sit and do nothing and watch my grass grow for 7 weeks. And Melanie mows our grass, if you do or don't know that. So I would just sit and watch Melanie mow the grass every so often. But part of what I've kind of looked at in doing in this is I have reached out to our denomination and gotten a list of churches back, and it was a list of 13 or so churches, and I've narrowed it down to 5 that have hit the 100 and the 200 barrier, and even one of them started an additional campus in the past 5 years under one pastor. And so I'm hoping to go visit these churches and kind of get an idea about what their environment, what their culture is like, what took them from less than 100 to 120 to break that barrier, because that's a difficult barrier to break. We broken it on occasion, and even before COVID, we were doing really well, and then how they then kind of took that farther and then hit the 220 and so on and so forth. So I'm excited about the opportunity. I've been in touch with those pastors, and I'm going to kind of sit with them and interact with them. I'm even able to go and visit with a staff meeting on one of those days, and so I'm just grateful for that opportunity to go and learn that. But I also want to say that I'm not coming back with okay, cookie cutter, here's what we do, right? Because I have seen that. I've seen pastors do that, and it doesn't work. What works in these places, 2 in Florida, 2 in Ohio, 1 in Mississippi, what works in these places is not going to work specifically in ours. But these ideas, these cultures, these prayers, these mindsets is really something that we can figure out. What does that look like in Birdsboro and beyond? What does that look like for us to minister into this community and look like for us to minister into whatever community's next? Because we're not looking just for here. We've talked about it numerous times. We're beyond this. What does our next campus look like? What does our next site look like to plant? And so all of this will be beneficial, I think, for do that. There's some personal things that I'm going to kind of study and read along the way, and some things for ministry that I know we'd like to do here. One thing that I've learned about myself, you may or may not know this about me, you probably do, is I like to try new things, even when it comes to, and that spills over into my leadership here at church. I'm like, let's try that. We'll see how it works. If it doesn't, we'll throw it out. If it does, we'll see what worked. We'll tweak it and we'll move on. I like to try new things. And what I've noticed here as a church, and I'm talking super fast. This is okay. You can go back and listen to this later if you want to. But what I've noticed as a church is when we've tried something new, the kingdom of God grows. When we've tried something new, this community, this body of believers grows. And so we want to always keep doing for that, because it keeps us from just falling back into the normal routine of everything that we've always done, and it kind of stretches us a little bit. Because anytime we're stretched in our faith, that's a really good time when God pushes us into something that we didn't think we could do. 1, because we can't do it. 2, because we lean on to him. And so really that's what I'm looking forward to in this. And so looking forward to these weeks that I'm going to be away, 7 weeks. There's a lot that you guys are going to do. Listen, this is not... Everybody hear me now? Everybody's looking at me? Eye contact? This is not cat's away, the mouse will play, right? You guys have heard that, right? That's not just a Southern thing, right? That's not what this is, right? This is not, Pastor Macy is not the substitute who's going to show a movie every week. That's not what's going on, right? There are specific people that I have lined up to come in and preach throughout the weeks that we're doing this, the first 4 weeks, and then Pastor Macy is preaching a series at the end of it, and I want you to be a part of all of those. Because I've heard of churches before when the pastor went away and they kind of stopped meeting. Now, and kind of everybody just kind of said, we're not doing this anymore. And churches close when things like that happen. And I don't think that's you all. I just say that's like worst case, worst fear scenario. So when you guys are having a good time at worship, I'm going to be worried every time. Are they even there? Did they even unlock the doors today? I don't really think that. I'm sure that you will, right? Somebody please make sure that you unlock the doors. But I don't want you to look at this opportunity as Even though it's not even an opportunity for me to get a break. It is a break. It's a change of pace, change of perspective, change of place, right? And I think God will do something, but he's going to do something here as well, right? I'm not taking him with me. I'm not going, hey, God, I need you where I am and where I am alone. I want God to do things here because the people in this community will still need to find their way to Jesus Christ. The people of this community will still have needs that come into their lives that they're going to need to be met. The people in this community are still going to walk indoors and go, I don't know why, but I thought I needed to be here today. And you all have a responsibility, the same responsibility you have every week, actually, to engage with them and make sure that Christ is made famous in their lives. So that's a little bit about what's going on. If you've got more questions about whatever it is, you can send me an email or you can try and catch me on the way out because I am telling you, the other part of this is when service is over today, like that's when I start. Like I'm out the door and then it begins. So I wrote way less today so that I could get out a little faster. But the other problem is I'm not going to get to talk to you for 7 weeks, so I got a lot to get in. So I don't really know which one's going to win out. My guess is I'm not going to talk for 7 weeks. I got a lot to get out is what's going to win over here. So, but I'm grateful for the opportunity. I'm grateful that Pastor Macy will lead you all here over the next coming weeks. And when I come back, we'll actually be beginning our All Church series. And she's going to tell more about that as we get a little bit closer. But we're beginning our All Church series. I'm not going to tell you what it is right now. I'm going to let her do that. But I'm not going to tell you specifically what it is. But what it is where we as a church, on Sunday mornings, we talk about a specific topic, and then every small group, every adult small group, every children's small group, every teen small group, every small group discusses these same subjects. So we get this synergy behind what this is. And so I encourage you for the 4 weeks of that series. It's the shortest all-church series we have ever done. 4 weeks. For the 4 weeks of that series, I want you to get in a small group. This is my plea. I constantly make pleas for small groups, but I want you to get in a small group. If you look at the listing of small groups and you're like, none of these times fit for me, so I don't have to go to one, you let us know and we'll add a time. We'll figure it out. We'll make it happen. We believe in this so greatly that we want to do what we can to make sure you're a part of this small group, right? We talk about small groups a lot. You guys get that. But the All Church series is one of the highlights of the year, I think, for those of you who have been here a while. Is it a highlight of the year? Somebody could have said yes, like immediately. That would have been really great. So thank you. Is that like a highlight of the year? Yeah. There you go. That's a little more on the ball next time, folks. We can cut that part out online, right? We could just splice those together. Anyway, I'm grateful for what's going on, for what's happening. I'm grateful for what God has been doing and for what he will continue to do in this body of believers and in us as individuals. And so what we've been studying for this summer series, the past 10 weeks, the entire summer, is this idea of the citizens of heaven. And what we've been doing is we've been looking at Hebrews chapter 11 at some of these saints, some of these heroes. And we've been reading their stories. But the other thing that we've done along with that is had heroes from within our body. From heroes from within this group of believers. You know, our own family have gotten up and shared some of their faithful stories of when God has come through in big ways and small ways in their lives. And so today, Craig is going to come share a little bit about a story that he has where God was made big and it kind of came through in his life. And I'm looking for the handheld. Oh, there it is. Well, I'm going to get you to come, at least right here.
No. If I go up there, I'll end up falling on the floor because I'm
you don't have to come
clumsy
up here.
This time.
I might fall off too, but there you go.
Do you believe that God can control corporate America? Do you believe that he can provide you with jobs? Do you trust him enough? Back in the mid-90s, I was working in Philadelphia for the railroad, and I worked in IT. I was a project manager. I had 3 projects under me at the time, 3 people and 9 consultants working on those projects. 2 of the projects were 2 to 6 months in length, and 1 was 18 months. I had been there for 15 years plus a couple months. And then the management of the railroad decided that they wanted to sell the railroad, so they decided to downsize by offering a buyout. And the buyout was for middle management, which I qualified. You had to have at least 15 years. I qualified. And they did say that nobody could return to the railroad if you take the buyout. And I opted to take the buyout. Rumor was going around that they were going to sell the company anyway, so I signed up for it, and some of my workers who work with me were asking me what I was going to do for a job. I said, I'm not worried about that. I said, my life is in God's hands. He controls it. He will provide. And I said, it could be a job out in the suburbs. I said, it could be right here at the railroad again. And they spoke up and said, well, you know you can't come back here. They already told you you couldn't. I said, well, that's the point. I said, my life is in God's hands, not the railroad. So I opted to take the buyout. My last day there, the manager from the accounting department who I was working for on the projects came down to talk to me. And he said, Craig, we want to know if you were willing to stay for 18 months to finish out these projects. He said, you have to come back as a consultant. I said, well, I'll consider it. I said, but if I'm coming back, I'm losing all my benefits. I said, so therefore, this is the hourly rate I wanted, and it was 66% higher than what I was currently making. And I said, they also said, well, you have to move to the 15th floor with us in the accounting department because you're no longer working for the IT department. He said, I need to go away, run some figures, and get a budget approval. He came back a couple hours later and said, it's done. He said, I got 18 months worth of money. He said, if you're willing to stay, we'll move you to our floor, and you'll be working for us doing the same thing you're doing today for the next 18 months. And that was the last day of working there as an IT employee. They moved me to the 15th floor. A couple of days later, one of my consultants come up to talk to me about the project. As she sat down, excuse me, she said, I was riding up in the elevator with other consultants from other projects. And she said they were talking about someone who said his life was in God's hands. And she said God was in control. And she looked at me and she said, they must have been talking about you. I smiled and I said, they probably were. As far as I know, I was about the only person who did come back to the railroad to work, even though management said you couldn't. God is in control of my life. I finished up those 18 months. Meanwhile, this consultant ended the project. She came out to Collegeville area and got a job at a company there. At the end of 18 months, it was June, so I decided to take 2 months off for July and August. About the middle of August, I took my resume to this consultant. She was now an employee of another company. And I said, is there anything available here? She got me an interview, and September 2nd, 2 months to the day, I started working at that facility. Looking back over the last 30 years, the money that came from that buyout program, along with other stock options that the company was offering at the time I was employed there, ended up going into a retirement fund. That fund is funding our retirement today. God had plans. He was in control.
Does these wonderful things. Sometimes when we don't deserve them, he still does these wonderful things. But he also just loves to bless his people who are obedient and love him. That's just something that our God does. And it's obvious in the stories that we read. It's obvious in the stories that we hear that that's the kind of God that we serve. And that testimony is very much everything that we've kind of been reading in Hebrews chapter 11. Like Hebrews chapter 11 is this hall of faith. Like that's a moment that you would put it up there and go, there's a moment where an individual, in spite of all things against him, said, you know what, I'm going to trust that God does this because I know he's bigger than whatever this silly little company is. They may think they're the big ones and whatever else, but my God is way bigger than whatever this is. And that is a really tough place to live in sometimes, because what's in front of us looks huge. It looks really big. Sometimes it's hard to say my God is bigger than this when this is overwhelming us and defeating us day in and day out. But to have that kind of faith is the faith that God calls us to. And that's, again, what we read in this Hebrews chapter 11. And Hebrews chapter 11, it is not a history lesson. That's not what it's designed for. It's not just so we can look back and study and say this is what happened in Israel's past, or not even so that the people that he's writing it to can look at. It is specifically written to believers who were facing very serious challenges to living out their faith. And what they were going through even in that moment was going to get a lot worse as they begin to face persecution. Those in Hebrews, as they begin to face persecution for their beliefs, and they were going to experience a lot of these things that we're going to read about a little bit today. And what the writer wants to do is he wants to address those challenges in their lives. And he says to them, I want you to consider all of the ones who have gone before. I want you to look at all the testimony of the ones who faced similar things, of all the ones who overcame these really difficult situations. And the common denominator in so many of them is that they did not look at the situation that they were in, but they looked beyond to somewhere else. There's a place that's destined for us. That's a promise that's given for us. That's what I'm going to look towards, and this doesn't make any difference. It's as if the writer of the Hebrews is saying to them, and he's saying it to us, he says, hey, let's look to the past. Let's see how all of these people have lived before us, and you know what? We're here, right? Are you here? I'm going to ask you to participate a couple of times today. Are you here? Yeah. Right. We're here. And so that means someone else went through the trial and the turmoil and made it through unscathed. Maybe not unscathed, but they made it through it. Right? And so he says, because we're here as this body of believers, then they must have done the right thing in this moment. They must have held true to the faith. They must have lived according to what it was that their God was saying to them. And if they could do it, then whatever you're going through, you can do it as well. And so he says, be encouraged. And so what he's done is he's gone into this great detail. He's gone into like this one sentence detail for all of these different individuals, all of these different men and women. And then he kind of, as we get to the end, verses 32 or something like that, he begins to kind of pick up the pace. He's kind of realizing that he doesn't have the ink and he doesn't have the time, right? He's looking at the clock and it's like 11 o'clock. It's not. It's 10:40 here, right? But he's looking at the clock and he's going, I got to speed this up. I got to move through a little bit faster if I'm going to get through all of the things that I want to make sure that I get through. And sometimes I'm like that as well. Like I can appreciate this from him. You know, he's got a word count, he's keeping track of it, and he's talking fast, right? And I can appreciate that. And this is kind of where we read 2 weeks ago, and he starts with this. He says, and what more shall I say? Time will not allow me to tell of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, David, Samuel, and the prophets, right? That's what we read a couple of weeks ago. And then he doesn't even have time to keep naming names. And this is where I'm going to slow down, because this is where we're going to get to the meat of what I'm trying to get to today, right? Well, you're quick on that one. And so this is what he does. So he moves through this naming these names. He kind of moves from that, and then he starts just simply listing out some of the accomplishments of these great heroes of faith. Right? He's not naming names. He's listing accomplishments. See, this is what they have done. So picking up at like 33 through the beginning of 35, this is what he says. He lists those people, and he says, who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, gained what was promised, who shut the mouths of lions, quenched the raging fire, and escaped the edge of the sword, who gained strength from weakness, became mighty in battle, and put foreign armies to flight. Women received back their dead, raised to life again. That's exciting, right? Let me try it again, because I don't think you heard it. Who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, gained what was promised, shut the mouths of lions, quenched the raging fire, escaped the edge of the sword, who gained strength from weakness, became mighty in battle, put enemies to flight, and women received back their dead, raised to life again. There's much better. I don't always appreciate you, but right now I do. I'm just kidding. I always appreciate her. But this is the kind of stuff that we get excited about. These are the same stories. These are our favorite Bible stories. These are the same ones. If you go down to children's church, these are the stories we tell over and over and over again. These mighty conquests of God, right? These are the kind of stories, if you were an old-time Nazarene, or if you are an old-time Nazarene, this is the one where they're running up and down the aisles and they're waving their hankies, right? So I'm told. I wasn't here. I don't know. That's only rumor for me, I guess, right? But this is those kinds of stories. All of the, and not just would these have been exciting for them to hear, these should be stories that are exciting for us today. We would love to see some of this stuff happen in our day and age, wouldn't we? Wouldn't we like to see kingdoms and authorities and strongholds that stand against the word of God be overcome and then made humble? I think we would like to see that. We all want to believe that the promises that God makes to us can still come true in our lives. Maybe not for land, or maybe not for an offspring, but certainly the promises where he says, I will never leave you nor forsake you. That's a big one, because I feel like I should be left behind sometimes. The promises that he says is the finished work of the cross is enough, and it will always be enough. The promise that he says, hey, I'm going to come back one day. I'm going to go and prepare a place, and I'm going to come back and get you for that place. Like, we want promises to continue to come true today. We want the mouths of our adversarial lion to be shut, so his voice isn't heard in the world we live in today. We want dead things to come back to life again. We want the exact same things that these people were talking about, that the writer of Hebrews is talking about. And so what these people had, what these people who did these things, what they have is this: God is bigger than my problems faith. Right? That's what they had. This group had God is bigger than my problems faith. Right? That's what Craig with the railroad is. God is bigger than this railroad. God is bigger than whatever it is in front of me. This is when we face obstacles that are bigger than we are. We can't figure it out. We can't see a way through. Everything we've done, plan A, plan B, plan C, plan D, fell flat, did not work. We can't see a way through. And so, unfortunately, it's the last thing we end up doing, but it should be the first. We rest in God. And we go, you know what? He's bigger than this. And so I'm going to let him do. I'm going to trust that he's going to come through. I'm going to trust that he's going to overcome, and I'm going to trust that he's going to do what I can't. Sometimes it's provision, sometimes it's guidance, sometimes it's healing. Whatever it is, we're going to trust that God's going to come through, and he does. And it's nothing short of miraculous. And we probably all have those testimonies, large and small, in our lives. And he's writing this because it's important that we be reminded of this. We need to keep this in mind, because we live amongst the people that often deny the influence of God, deny God and his influence and love for the world, the people of this world. That's what we live in. But if we're going to be followers of Jesus Christ, we cannot afford to forget the fact that our God is still a miracle-working God. And he still does those great and mighty things in people's lives. That's why we've tried to listen to the people who have shared their own stories. Because it's one thing to read it in a book that happened a long time ago, and we might have difficulty with that. I don't mean to diminish the book. That's all I'm trying to say, right? But it's a whole other thing to be able to walk up to Craig afterwards and go, all right, just logistically, how did you do that? What did you do when you didn't have a job? For those 3 days, whatever it was. Like, we can walk up and ask those questions. We can walk to any of these individuals that shared over the past couple of weeks. Because we cannot afford to forget that we serve a miracle-working God, and he's still doing great things in the lives of his people. In fact, the whole basis of our faith is the miracles of God. That God intervened in his creation, that he brought life from death, he brought peace out of chaos, he brought sight to the blind, and so on and so on. There's so many miracles that we read about throughout Scripture, but the one that stands on top of all of them is this miraculous resurrection of Jesus Christ, his son. Right? Because of that one, so much is afforded into our lives. And that really should get us excited. There was a little bit, and we're easing into it, but you're going to get there, I'm pretty sure, right? That should get us excited. And this list would have gotten them excited. Absolutely, this list would have gotten them excited. Because they're living under oppression. They want to see it done away with. They've got things coming against them they'd like to see gotten rid of. And so there's no doubt that this kind of pumped them up. This is like the halftime speech, the pregame speech. They're running down the hallway, whatever. Go Birds? Ugh, whatever, right? That's just for her, right? Definitely cut that part out. I'm just making sure you're paying attention, right? And so this would have gotten them pumped up, right, to go and kind of live out their faith in the most remarkable ways possible, knowing that God is bigger than whatever obstacle stands in your way. Right, that's the first part of what this has been, right? And that's these couple of verses, that's what this is getting at. And so I think when we hear these and then we move out of this one, the question is like, where do we need to trust God like this? Where do you need to trust God like this? That he is bigger than the figurative and the literal trials that you're facing. Right, that he is bigger than the financial hardship that you're experiencing. That he is bigger than whatever it is that's going on in your body. That he is bigger than whatever injustice you're facing. Where do you need to just know that he is just bigger than you are? Like, that's a very simple thing. But it's something we all need to believe. And if he ended right here, if we were done, 10:47, we walk out the door and I start my trip and I go home and I load up and we get going and whatever else, and my mom's probably online, we'll see you in 6 hours, right? That would be a really great high note to end. We could walk out going, man, God is good and he has got whatever's in front of me. But the problem is, that's only half of the story. If that's all we have, if that's all we walk away with, then our understanding of by faith is incomplete and it is immature and it is useless. And so the writer of Hebrews continues on. So far, it's been all of these heroic conquests and achievements, these great things that God has done to the people who called on his name, and then now it is entirely different. The rest of verse 35. This is Paul Harvey, the rest of the story, right? You remember that? Okay. I'm not so old that I don't remember that. I'm not so young that I don't remember that. That's what I meant to say, I guess. So here's the rest of it, right? Verse 35. He says, others were tortured. And as exciting as the rest of that stuff was, you get to this and it snaps you back to reality pretty quickly. And then you might want to go, well, you know what? Kind of Paul went through some stuff and God freed him every time, so he's probably going to be okay. Others were tortured and refused their release so that they might gain a better resurrection. And then it gets worse. Still others endured mocking and flogging and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawed in two, they were put to death by the sword. They went around in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, oppressed, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains and hid in caves and holes in the ground. As glorious as this was, like this second list is just as depressing. I think to be fair, I should read the second one as second time as well, right? Others were tortured and refused their release, so that they might gain a better resurrection. Still others endured mocking and flogging and even chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawed in two, they were put to death by the sword. They went around in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, oppressed, and mistreated. The world was not worthy of them. They wandered in deserts and mountains and hid in caves and holes in the ground. Vast, stark difference between 1 and 2, between Group A and Group B. Now, before we go too far, I want you to fully understand this second group here, what's going on in their lives is they're not being punished for misdeeds. This is not because of their sinfulness against a holy God and he has to do what he needs to do. This happened to them because of their faith, not their sin. So I want you to know, if you write stuff down, if you whatever else, this is not up there, you're not going to see that. This is not a slide. But I want you to know that by faith, some people experience great victories. We love it. Let's have more of that. But also by faith, some people endure great losses. That's a lot harder to say. But they are both true. And they are both necessary. And they are both important. And so these individuals, this second group, they experienced great loss. These were men and women who could have saved their lives by renouncing their faith. That's what it indicates. That's what it says. Could have saved their lives by renouncing their faith, but instead they chose to renounce their lives. They were not in the slightest bit concerned about what happens on this side of death as much as they were what happens on the other side of it. And this didn't make any difference. That's the important part. This group of believers, they found themselves probably in the exact situations as the first group. They likely asked God to do miracles in their lives, and they likely believed wholeheartedly that God would do them. And he said no. He could have, but he didn't. He did, in some, escape the sword, were victorious, but some were not. Sawn in two, tortured and thrown in prison, and so on and so forth. And yet, even when God said no, they still showed faith in him. Even when God said no, they still trusted him. Even when their prayers were not answered the way that they wanted them to be answered, they still trusted him. Even when they were in the difficult situation that they didn't want to be in, they still trusted him. And so it's not just with their lives, but it is with their deaths that they proclaimed that knowing God was better than anything and everything else. It's easy to say it with my life. It's a whole lot harder to say it with our deaths. Especially in the moments when we feel like we cannot endure what it is that we're going through. God, I cannot get through this. I need you to get me out of it. And when God says no, we get mad. Did you not hear me say out of? Victory over? And so where the first group was this God is bigger than my problems, they believed that he was bigger than any obstacle. They believed that God would deliver them from whatever came against them. The faith of this second group is entirely different. The second group's faith is God is better than blank. That's their faith. God is better than whatever it is I'm going through. God is better than whatever's in front of me. God is better than whatever pain is coming against me. God is better than me living my life the way I wanted to live it. Again, another really difficult thing to say. God is better than. And this one believes that no matter what you're going through, walking away from him is just not an acceptable answer. But Peter says something like it, where are we going to go? Where can I find life anywhere else? And this one doesn't look like a victory. The other one definitely does. You stand victorious over fallen walls or whatever. This one does not look like a victory. But if we only have faith when things are good, when times are good, if we only have faith when we're happy and when we're prosperous, then whatever faith you have is weak and ineffective and useless. And when the trial comes, not if the trial comes, when the trial comes, how many of you have ever experienced a trial? Sure. The rest of you are in denial about it right now. When the trial comes, your faith is not going to withstand it. If all you are is puppies and cupcakes and victories and win. However, if when the lashing begins, if when the prison doors lock, even when the saw touches your flesh, if you can in those moments continue to live by faith, then that's the only way we live that pleases God. That's the only way we can live where he is made glorious and made famous through what we do. That's the only way we actually make it through anything that's going on in our lives. The greater test of faith isn't the thrill of victory, but the moment of agony when we knew that God could, but he just didn't. And we don't like this aspect of God. This is not a part of God that we want to talk about or think about or be in. We want the other side of it all the time. But here is an absolute truth as well, that sometimes God withholds the miracles, the miraculous things in our life, because he wants to demonstrate through us that knowing him eternally is more valuable than anything on earth. That's what he wants us to know. That's what he wants the world around us to know. Because they don't think this. Do you think this? Do you believe this? It's easy to say, but is it evident and obvious in your life? And I'm not saying it's not. I'm not saying it's not. Don't hear what I'm not saying on that. I'm not calling out each and every one of you going, no. I'm just saying, let's be honest. In the moments when I don't get what I want, in the moments when I compromise, in the moments when I don't endure, am I living like I believe this is true? If we're honest, don't many of us not live like this day in and day out? Sometimes God withholds the miraculous so that he can demonstrate through us, so that we can learn for ourselves, more importantly, that knowing him eternally is more valuable than any earthly experience. I want you to really wrestle with that idea, with whether or not you truly believe that. It is really easy to say at 10:57 on a Sunday morning when we've had this great worship and we've lifted up the name of God and we're talking about communion in a minute, and I'm getting ready to leave for 7 weeks. Like, it's really great to say this then. But it's really tough to say on Tuesday night at 11, or Thursday morning at 9, or Saturday afternoon when the phone calls come in. There are moments in life when this is a lot more difficult to live by. But we don't get to not live by it in those moments. We're still called to live by this in every moment. And so we got these two groups of people, right? First group, second group. Now I'm going to ask you a question. I don't want you to answer immediately because it's a difficult question. Would you rather be group A or group B? Do we need to read them again? Like, do you remember one side was really victorious? I was going to go back and read them, but I'm not going to read them again. One side's victorious, right? They overcome everything. Their God is great. They're standing up and they're proud and they're tall and going, yep, my God is awesome. And the rest of the group is bleeding, gasping for air. Which one sounds more fun? Like group A, right? B. You can be honest. Group A writes. There's a few crazy ones that might say group B, right? But that's not what we want. We don't want group B. I would like to say that no one in their right minds wants group B, but you get the idea. Like, we'll take this one if we have to because we're good believers, but that's the one we want, right? Can we at least maybe agree on that? God, if you got to, this one, but this is the one I want. Let's make sure this is the one that I'd rather have. Yeah, okay, this is the one that I'd rather have. But what I think the writer is trying to show us here is that at some point God calls us to live in both groups. At some points we have a membership in each of them. And there may even be a point, and I think we'll move through, there's times, but I think there may even be a point where it will be the last membership that we have. And it'll be in group B. And we're not going to overcome it. We're not going to get out of what's coming against us. And we'll lay down our lives, knowing that God is better than whatever this thing was. Whether our lives or the situation ends in victory or loss, we have to be ready to respond to whichever assignment God gives us. God, I want A. I want you to take B. Now let's talk about A. God, I'll take B. I'm just going to trust that either you're going to show me that you're bigger or I'm going to know and prove that you're better. But let me tell you the other thing about group B, the one that we don't want to be in. This one, group B, has, I think, probably the potential, has probably the biggest impact on kingdom growth. Sure, absolutely. A miraculous answer to prayer or deliverance from someone, when something comes through in your life, it can amaze an unbeliever. It can lead to faith developing in them. Those things happen, but it is almost just as likely that everyone around that miracle will just kind of dismiss it as coincidence, as a misdiagnosis in the first place, as an exaggeration or an outright lie. Unfortunately, that's the reality of the world we live in. No, not a miracle. Doctors just missed it. He probably graduated last in his class. Whatever. However, what seems to have the biggest impact on unbelievers coming to saving knowledge and faith in Jesus Christ is when you and I, like individually, when we, right? This is not like, hey, I hope he does this. This is we all do this. It's when all of us has joy in the midst of pain. It's when all of us have this unshakable hope in the midst of overwhelming darkness. It's when we exhibit this peace that surpasses all understanding. It's when we have love for everyone in a world that seemingly is driven by hate. It's when our eyes are set beyond what's in front of us to something greater later on. When we live those ways, when that's what we do, when that's obvious and evident in our lives, when we're coming through B with that mindset and those understandings, then what the rest of the world sees is that there's not just something bitter, there's not just something bigger, but there's something better than the world that we live in right now. When we live that way, it affects people. That's why we share the testimonies, because we know they're meaningful. We know we hear it and we go, it's possible. We know when we see those things, we can go, you know what, I can get through. I can have hope. I can persevere. I can find peace. I can be joyous about this. I can see beyond what's going on. And if we do it, everyone else does it too. You don't have to be a believer to see these things are true and evidence. And I know we want the miracle. Absolutely pray for the miracle. Believe for the miracle that God is going to do those things in our lives, but we have to also be ready to show that the faith that glorifies God needs to come out in our lives even when you don't get the miracle. And maybe that is, that he doesn't. It's a way better mindset. It's a way better approach to have. To go, God, you didn't come through, but you still are who you are. Why are you stealing my points? Did you sneak my notes? So if I ask you questions at the end of the first group, let me ask you questions at the end of the second group. Where do you need to trust God like this? What would you be willing to go through so that someone else would find Jesus? Because you're going to have to go through something maybe. Would you be willing to suffer great loss so that a loved one could find great victory? Would you be willing to suffer great loss so that a stranger could find great victory? Would you be willing to suffer loss so that an enemy would find great victory? John Piper says something to the effect of, God is better than anything that life can give and anything that death can take. Roughly, that's what it says. I couldn't find it, but that's how I remember it in my head. But that's the way that we approach life. That's the way that we live by faith. And that's what he's giving to them. This is what the writer of Hebrews is saying. Here's what I want you to have. Man, great group. Wonderful, God can do, God is bigger than. But I also need you to know that not everything works out the way that you want it to. And in those moments, I want you to know God is better than your life. And he can handle things when you're gone. And so having given all of the encouragement he could, this is where he ends. He says, these were all commended for their faith. Verse 39, these were all commended for their faith, yet they did not receive what was promised. And the key word there is all, right? Underlined, isn't it? Yeah. All. It wasn't that one group had faith and the other one didn't. Both the ones that got the miracle, the ones that walked through the fire, the ones that escaped the sword, and the ones who were afflicted, who were mistreated, and who wandered, and who paid with their lives, believing that that God was better than anything else. They're both commended for their faith. They both had the faith that at the end of the day pleases God. They both, whether they were in Group A or Group B, it made no difference what they heard at the end of their lives, whether it was later or now, was well done, good and faithful servant. You don't have to raise your hands and tell me, because I'm going to just assume we all want to hear that. None of us wants to go, see ya, I don't know you. We want to hear the well done, good and faithful servant. And so listen, sometimes we live by faith believing what God can do. He's bigger than this. And other times we live by faith believing in just who he is, regardless of what he does. He is still God. We are still not. So here's what I want you to do is we're going to pray, and we're going to worship. We're going to close with worship, and then we're going to move into communion here in a minute. The worship team can come up. But here's what I want you to pray first. I'm going to walk you through communion later. If you didn't get your elements, you can come grab those in a minute or whatever you want to, or we'll have someone deliver them to you if that's what needs to be. But don't worry about that now. Set it off to the side. I want us to move, first of all, to this idea, this time of prayer and a little bit of worship. Because I don't want us to just hear stuff like this and go, hey, that's pretty neat. Let me mark my notes and put a little highlighter thing in it, and I'll come back and I'll read this later on. Like, that doesn't do anything if we don't figure out what it means in our lives from this moment forward. And so these two lists are every single one of us. So where are you? Which list are you in right now? Some of you absolutely need a God is bigger faith to overcome whatever obstacles in front of your life. Some of you have something that is in front of you have no idea how you're going to deal with. I have no idea how I'm going to get beyond this thing. I've done everything I can do, and I keep falling flat on my face and failing each and every time. God, I need something else. And you've tried a dozen other ways as well, but everything falls and falters. Falters and fails. And whatever it is in your life is still there despite your best efforts. I want you to find your way to an altar. I want you to come down here, and I want you to pray, and I want you to just pray until you get beyond the fact that God is bigger than whatever that silly little thing is. I don't mean to diminish it, but it needs to be diminished. It needs to not have this prevalent place of the biggest thing in your life. It needs to be, it's secondary at best to who God is and what he wants to do in me. And so the other side of that is you need to have a God is better faith to get through whatever it is you're going through. To say, God, if I don't make it through this, if my life is entirely different after this, if my life is over after this, then God, I'm going to trust that you're better and that you can come through in a way that I can't even imagine. Or maybe you just know that God has called you to something bigger and better in your own life. I know with a church this size, God is calling one of you to do something more than you're doing. And I can tell you how I know that. Because he calls all of us to do more than we're doing. And I know if he's calling me to do more than I'm doing, he's calling you to do more than you're doing. And listening to that and handing that over sounds near impossible. But he's asking, saying, hey, I want you to have faith. I want you to live by faith, and I want you to do this thing. Lastly, it may just be that you just need to begin or restart this relationship with Jesus, a real relationship with Jesus that you never had. I don't have all the answers for you today on what that looks like. I don't have all the answers of what it looks like in my own life. But I know life with him is better than anything else I found anywhere else. I know there are still struggles. I know there are still difficulties, but I know who holds me. And I know who sees me through. And so if you don't have that real relationship, then I want you to come and do that. So there is a lot that I just threw out. My guess is that's landed on one or more of you. Man, I would encourage you, just don't sit and wait for a snack and get ready to leave. I would encourage you to meet with Jesus in this moment and let him do something greater in your life than you can imagine. Because that's what the story of Hebrews 11 is. God wanting to do something greater than any of them could ever imagine in their life. So, Lord, we're grateful for your love, your grace, your mercy that you extend to each and every one of us each and every day, Lord. There is no moment of any day when you are not evident and obvious and working in our lives. We may not see it. We may not want to see it. We may try and deny it. We may try and justify it. We may try and explain it away. But Lord, that's just because we struggle with coming to the point to say that, God, I'm not in charge of me. We struggle to go, God, I think that you're there and that you're bigger than everything else. We struggle with saying, God, I'm going to lay everything down of who I am. And so we allow ourselves to just kind of explain away the great works that you've done in our life and the lives of others. Lord, we allow ourselves to be distracted by all of the other things that look shiny and pretty and that cause us to think that we can do it on our own. We can pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and we can be accomplished and successful. Lord, so much wants to say that we can be independent. We don't need you. But all of it starts with this wrong view of who you are. So God, in this moment, we just very simply, we just very quietly, without a lot of fanfare, with just you and me. God, I want to say I believe you're bigger than, and I believe you're better than. And if that can be the cry of our heart, if that can be what we live, the way we live our lives, then Lord, we live the kind of by faith that pleases you. And so Lord, in this moment, I just ask the Holy Spirit to do what I can't, to make up for my broken words, my ineffectiveness. Lord, let your Spirit rest and move. Because we are people who don't need clever words, but we need a loving God. So Lord, you challenge us in this moment. You move us in this moment. You keep us unsettled in our seat, so that we can't do anything but run to you. Well, then our God is better, and our God is bigger on our lips. I know I've said this before. Maybe you've heard it, maybe you haven't. One of my favorite things to do is when you guys are into a song, I just like to turn and just listen. I can hear y'all out of this ear, and y'all are amazing. If that's a small semblance of what heaven's going to be like, I cannot wait. And I'm going to miss y'all. But here's where I want to end this. Right after that in Hebrews, he moves on to this. He says this in Hebrews chapter 12. He says, let us fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sitting down at the right hand of the throne of God. Jesus, who we celebrate, who we take the communion in place of, who wanted this, deserved this, got this, scorned it, and sits at the right hand of God. That's where we want to be, not right hand, but in his presence. That it means we live by faith at 11:28. I'm sorry, it's 11:28. At 11:28 on Sunday. And then we do it every moment beyond this. Have a great week. Everyone else will be back here next week at 10 a.m. on site and online. Go live by faith, BNC.